there, young people. Nice day today.
I know all of you use Tink Tonk these days and therefore have an attention span of about 10 seconds per video. So luckily, today you're in for a treat because it's going to be less than an hour. Even better, you get a preview of what my previous video was like without actually having to watch it. I thought I'd basically just lie to you and put what I think is correct-ish now. And you know what? Do you care? Like, honestly, I'm doing an update. This is for about June 2022 to now, which is March of 2024. But whatever, I'm gonna go into it because I know otherwise all the iPad babies will click off. Looking at what we've got is a little bit depressing. There was a time when I would happily have told my friends to play choices, but if I was basing it on these books, I would not tell anyone to play on this app. I'm so sorry. There are some that I think are okay or actively enjoyable, so it's not too bad. I'll start off with Alpha. I hate werewolves, and there's just the whole alpha male thing. Because let's be honest, they're talking about an alpha male. You can have a female who's an alpha, but they write the main character to be a woman and the love interest to be a man, and they think that all women like to be submissive and really like dominant big muscle men, which is just choices in a nutshell. Anyway, for the actual ranking, I don't know if I'd even put it in the same tier as Wolf Bride, but I'm gonna put it in very bad. I enjoyed some of the scenes, to be honest. I think I liked Carla, and that was pretty much it. But having to deal with someone who thinks they dominate you and just choices as a whole, assuming that that's something you want, and even if you're not self-inserting, like, just it makes me not want to read it because I'm not interested in reading about those types of relationships. Most people probably don't exist in a relationship or want to have a relationship which is dominant and submissive. At least not everyone does. They can calm down. It's every book now. Blades of Light and Shadow, book 2, kind of slays. I wouldn't say it's... I don't know if I put it on the same level as the first book. I mean, it's still in very good, because I don't think it's materially worse. I mean, okay, they look a bit goofy, but that's that doesn't affect your gameplay. I think it was kind of rushed, but there's going to be a third book, so that's all good. They can sort it out, maybe, if they still have writers that are good by then. There are a lot of people that probably hate Aaron, and objectively, not a great guy, but, like, we don't get many femboys in this. Yeah, give us unexperienced, nerdy, skinny man. Like, that's what the people want, and everyone really liked it, even though he's evil and horrible. We don't get that type of personality or even just look in male love interests that often. Obviously, that's not the main reason I like the book in any way. He still isn't, like, my favorite or anything. It's just the only thing of note that I would put that I haven't already said about the first book. Maybe my only complaint about the second book is that it's kind of as iconic as the first, but I'm sure that's partly because of nostalgia. There were a lot of really good aspects. I think the character development was quite good, and I'm glad they still have a friendship in the book, because a lot of the time that just gets swept under the rug for romance. Love that PB gave us the option to not choose a final love interest and just let us be poly, because otherwise I would have been fucked. Crimes book 2, I didn't like that much. I have to be honest. It's not bad. I put it in sort of good because it's not like I hated the characters or found it really boring or anything. But it's not a scratch on book 1. That, or maybe I'm just bored. I think I do tend to get a little bored when the characters are already in their relationships and just doing the same thing, not really advancing the plot all that much. Also, it's a single Li book, and as much as I do like Tristan, it's boring. I want a choice to not be forced with someone all the time. I want to enjoy the book without a romantic element, or to just have the choice to not be with a person. Because I think part of why romancing on choice is interesting is because you get the choice and it's not inevitable that they're going to get together, so you actually have an element of, will they, won't they. I'm not even a romantic reader, but that's choices these days. There is nothing else to do. So that's why I'm talking about romance so much. Back in the day, I would have barely brought it up. I could not tell you the plot of Dirty Little Secrets, even though I have read the entire thing. I'm going to put it in bad. I wouldn't even put it in very bad or even terrible, even though it's like really silly, just because it's really silly and I don't think it takes itself seriously. It's a murder mystery, but is it? I don't know. It's just alternating scenes between being horny, having really awkward sex scenes as well, and main character that, if you play as a guy, is really goofy. It's hilarious actually. I mean, obviously gender roles aren't that important, but there is a difference in the way you would write the male experience and the female experience, just because they are treated differently in society. But they don't do that with the male characters that often, but especially not in this book. So so it's so strange. They're trying to write this like female rivalry that's like really misogynistic, but it's even funnier because your character's a guy, but it's a female rivalry. It's so odd, but it's kind of, I can't put it in very bad because it is sort of enjoyable to read how silly it is. I'm sure if I'd read this in Old Choices, I'd put it a lot lower. The standard is so low now that I don't have a clear idea of how much I actually like something, because you're comparing it to books that are much worse, and in comparison, the fact that it's at least somewhat enjoyable means that it has to be ranked higher. First comes love. Terrible. It's awful. I hate it so much. It's so silly. The whole plot is your best friend has entered a relationship and it seems perfectly fine, and you just hate this girl because you fancy your friend. Like, that's not her fault. Why are the whole friend group so invested in breaking them up and bullying this girl who's not even that bad? Like, okay, I don't think she is suited to the love interest, simply because they wrote it in a way that made it very clear that the love interest likes your character. Would also like to point out I'm referring to them as the love interest because I don't remember their name. I hated this book so much. Actively boring. I didn't like any of the characters, the plot, and I just thought it was a bit mean and misogynistic. Again, that's choice as a new theme. They did it in the past. They stopped for a bit because we told them, hey, that's not very cool. And then they brought it back and were like, hey, you know how you hate women? And the fans went, no. And they're still complaining. But they haven't got the memo yet, so that's what we're dealing with. Getaway Girls is actually pretty good. Where have I put Bachelorette Party? Because it's basically that, but perhaps better because it is a black-led cast, so you get like an added element of interest and diversity that you didn't get with Bachelorette Party. I liked Anita and Imani. I thought that was way more interesting than any of the other romantic relationships we got. But you don't play it for that. You play it for the family dynamics, and it's pretty good. It's a sort of rom-com, so it's not got any of the perhaps more dramatic elements that some of the more successful books have. But I think for what it is, it's very well written. I think the main character's by far the least interesting. I am so glad that we were able to play as the family members because they had interesting storylines or were just more interesting people. And you get to see them interact without the main character being involved, which I like. I like when characters have a life outside of the main character or their romantic interests. Guarded gets a solid terrible. Is there really a plot? There is a plot. It's an excuse to have a vaguely forbidden relationship between two people that would otherwise not be in the same place, which I guess is similar to a lot of books setting things in schools because they don't know how else to get these people in the same room. It is almost plotless. It is very, very, very boring. The Stalker storyline could be interesting if it was written in a book that was in any way good, but this is just about sex. It is these two really boring people who immediately wanted to fuck each other, trying to fuck each other. And I have not bought any of the sex scenes, so I couldn't even tell you if the main part of the story is good. And I think it's interesting that the main plot is behind a paywall, because you're not reading this for anything other than sex. I just moved the Royal Masquerade up to sort of good because I saw Guinevere and realised I wanted to put them about in the same spot. They're pretty much the same in my eyes. I don't find either of them overly endearing, but I think if we're speaking just objectively, if this is the type of book you enjoy, you'll probably like it. Neither of them are written in a bad way at all. They're fine. They're still very romance focused, but that works for the genre that they are. They're not written as like historical dramas, they're historical romances. And while I don't think even the romances themselves are that interesting, there's still a plot, and I'm sure that's just me. Hotshot is so silly. I don't even know if I'd put it in bad. I'm like leaning towards very bad, but then there's like Baby Bump and stuff down there. Honestly, back in the day, the terrible section would have a lot more of the books that I've put in just sort of bad. It's just these days they're just so bad. But yeah, Hotshot. Imagine you're Pixelberry, right? And you're deciding what would be the most interesting thing for a player to play as in a hockey book. You know, they could be a hockey player, and you make the fantastic decision that they should be a sports reporter. I'm sure being a sports reporter is an interesting occupation. In books, I think pretty much every main character that's ever been created is like a journalist of some sort. And in a book about hockey, you want to be the hockey player, not just someone who's in, once again, a vaguely forbidden relationship with a hockey player and wanting to have sex with them. It's the same thing over and over again with choices these days. It's, do you want to have sex with this person? It's not that forbidden, but it's a little forbidden because it's like bad for your reputation as like in your career or whatever. It's really boring. I don't really like any of it. I don't hate the love interest because they look really funny. They look a bit like a drowned rat and act like a drowned rat. They're hideous, obviously. They just beat people up for no reason. And I don't see how that is in any way endearing. But it's funny, and that's how I've ranked Dirty Little Secrets, so I'm ranking Hotshot the same. Immortal Desires Book 2. I have read the first two chapters, but I can't say much about it yet, because obviously that's not enough to judge it. It does seem decent so far. I think it would make more sense to just do Immortal Desires Book 1, because that is fantastic. I remember in the last video I made, it was probably the latest book that I hadn't read yet. It's pretty much very good. And I'm very surprised because I thought it was going to be shite. But I do like it. I think the two love interests are different enough to be interesting, so you're not just bouncing between two people who are essentially the same person. I even like their relationship with each other. I think it could be developed though, so book 2, give me some development in the friendship. Or even make them poly, I don't care. I like the main character enough. They are likable, but obviously I would like a book where our character is, for once, the dangerous one or the experienced one. I would like a book where I am a vampire from the start. I've been around for 2,000 years. You know, if you're going to self-insert, which I don't do, to be clear, but if you're going to make a book which is designed for people who may want to self-insert, let them be a 2,000-year-old vampire and not a human who gets abducted by them. It's simple. A good book. I found it quite funny. It is obviously, once again, very romance focused, but I don't mind. It's not single love interest. That's very rare these days. And even though 2 is laughable, and back in the day I would have complained like a little bitch, I'll take it. It gives you some degree of choice in what you're doing in the game of choices. It's like if Twilight was gay and slightly less trashy. Not that trashiness is a bad thing, but in this case, it is a good balance between genuine emotion and a fun amount of trash. Choices has been in a roughly 4 year long Dark Ages. It's not good. I think Kindred kind of captures the spirit of what Choices used to be like, even if it does have two love interests, kind of like Immortal Desires if it was gender locked. So I'm going to put it in very good. I think the two love interests were very likable. I liked that it focused on a sister dynamic. Kiss of Death, I'm only going to put in sort of bad. I hate it, the romance, but it kind of was like a worse ride or die. I liked the main character and Faith, and the main character and her bodyguard were interesting, and it's an interesting vibe, being part of a criminal world, but you are still at the bottom of it. Kind of wish that we were playing as the mastermind, which we kind of were by the end, but that's always the case. Laws 2 was really disappointing. I'm going to put it in sort of bad because I wouldn't say it's on the level of Passport to Romance, but it was not as good as it could have been. Very disappointed. Made Gabe Ritchie the center of the universe. Which, okay, he was in the first as well, but it was worse. It was worse this time. Even like their trashy hookups, which were probably quite popular in the last book, were kind of worse. Although there were some really interesting ones, like all those people who were thirsting after Sadie. Well, good for you. It was a decent scene. Murder at Homecoming, really good. Really, like it's very good. I loved it. The characters, the love interests, and may I add that there were three. Back in the day, that was pathetic, but these days, that's fantastic. Three love interests, a really likable main character who could be trans, but I don't remember if there was a pronoun option, but I'm pretty sure there was. And all of the love interests were likable, but also openly queer. They had the stories. They didn't make it a big deal or anything, but I'm glad they've done that in one of the books. Usually they just kind of ignore it, which makes you feel like they didn't write it for queer people. Also, just the plot. The plot is the part that I find the most interesting, obviously. It's very good, but there's not much I can say about that without just explaining the plot to you. So I usually just comment on whether I like love interests. Roommates with benefits. Ooh. I'm going to put that in very bad, actually. If you like that type of thing, I'm sure it is fine. It's not actually objectively that bad for a book about wanting to have sex with your roommate. It's just that that's not really me. I don't think anyone who reads Roommates with Benefits is looking for a well-made, like, deep novel. I'm pretty sure it's escapism, and that's amazing. It's just not what I would gravitate towards. Ship of Dreams. Ooh. I'm gonna put it in sort of bad. Finale was terrible. Leave it to Choices to make the Titanic boring.
Throwback to Storyscape, which made a Titanic story which everyone on Choices really liked.
I don't know why they made it a Titanic novel because it was only like a couple chapters and nothing really happened that affected the main character's story, and it did help to rush an ending. The best way to resolve a relationship issue between like two sisters is not to have one of them almost die. That just feels like a cop out. I think they could have easily just set this on any other luxurious boat and had it not sink. Yes, I'm aware that it is a ship. Surrender, is that Surrender Book 2? I don't know which one is which, I just put one of them on there. They're both terrible, I hate them both so much. I have nothing to say about it that's any different from the first book, apart from kind of cool that they let you be a dom for once, but I still don't like it. Billionaire's Baby, ooh, is that very bad or terrible? I'm going to put it in very bad. None of the characters were well developed. It had a weird thing against Daphne, who was the best character. I didn't really like anything about it, but it didn't make me as pissed off as like The Cursed Heart, so I'll give it that. Cursed Heart Book 2 is only slightly better than the first, but still on terrible tier for me, simply because I hated the first one so much that it's hard to even consider whether the second one was any better or not. They had to make a brother character that's 1,000 times more interesting than the love interest and give him a crop top. Like, you're giving a side character a crop top and not giving them any romance scenes. What is wrong with you? I am mostly kidding, but also not really. I liked that you could go crazy and start killing people at the end, but the most part it was just your character being upset that they're not magical and being the odd one out as usual that has no powers. And it's always, but they are powerful in a human way. Sure, but I've seen that a billion times before. They're also really annoying. The love interest is my least favorite in choices. Can't even say their name. Side characters, they were okay. Like they're not that interesting. But when you compare them to bloody love interest beginning with K and main character, they seem like the most well written people in the world. But they're actually super underdeveloped and boring. Yeah, I hate the Cursed Heart. I know that a lot of people like it, so I'm glad it got a sequel, and I believe people like it. I haven't been on Choice's social media that much, but I think it's well liked enough. I don't like it though. Deadliest Game, haven't read a single chapter, but I'm super excited. Duchess Affair, I'm going to put in very bad because it's just sex and really boring. Don't like the characters, etc. Barely remember a thing about it. The Nanny Affair, book 3, same old, hate it, terrible, same as the first two books. I'm sure it's very popular, but I don't like it. Phantom Agent, put in sort of good to good. It's for a single love interest book, I'll give it props. I wouldn't say it's like the most well written book in the world, but it's at least was interesting. I liked that our main character was a little pathetic loser and that the other character was the more shy one. I just think it's interesting to flip the dynamic a bit because we're used to all the boring, overconfident, dominating love interests and our useless little main character. No, no. In this book, the main character was useful. Untamable book 2, which is called Unbridled. It's not good. I don't know if I put it in bad or sort of bad though. I'm gonna put it in bad. I think because they have two love interests is making me treat it a little differently. It's still just porn basically with a little bit of country drizzled in there, but trashy but fun enough for me. I read it and don't actively hate it, but I do think it's really silly. Like they solve everything with sex. Villainous Valentine, I'm gonna put in sort of bad. I do love Olivia, and that's sort of why we're all there. I think I'm not interested that much in any of the other characters, but it's not canon. It's one silly little chapter, and it's just rushed and out of character. I think the Olivia one was the best, and it almost brought me back in time because it did feel a little bit like classic Choices writing, but yeah, it's not real and it doesn't really fit in with the book that actually came out in canon. You don't get to see the relationship develop because they're all doing it in one chapter, and I feel like there would have been things that would have changed in previous chapters. I don't know. I don't hate it. I think it's a good idea, but they need to make it longer or just edit the original books and add them as a love interest if they're that popular. I am surprised though that they chose these four specifically. I don't know if they're planning more books, but like Radiance and a book with however you pronounce his name and the other scary lady from Blades. I would not say they are the most popular ones they could have brought up. Like Gaius maybe would be a better option. I think he's like the most popular not love interest, and there's so many other ones that they could have put in that would have been better. I don't know. I don't see their stats. I don't know if Choices made that decision based on what they perceive as the most popular or how much money they get or who they even have left on their team. But it wouldn't be my choice in an ideal world. I think there are fans that would be a little bit disappointed to see a villainous Valentine book with these characters. Maybe it's because they had to be villains. I don't know, but yeah, it's a cool idea, but it's not perfectly executed. I think it's not a substitute for just making them actual love interests in the canon books. Well, that's my update for March 2024. I rambled more than I expected. There were actually more books I liked than I expected. For the most part, I think I maybe am overrating them a little bit just because I'm so used to bad Hope you enjoyed. Please give me your opinions in the comments because I do love replying to them and just seeing what people think. I will probably update this again eventually, even if you're not interested, because I am interested in doing that. So thank you for listening. Goodbye. If anybody knows of an alternative to TierMaker, please let me know. I don't want to use a service that Mr. Elon will benefit from. Elon Musk is a cunt, and I don't want to make a Twitter account just so I can make tier lists. So yeah, please let me know.